Daniel, about that satrap in Susa. Should he be replaced?
My men have thoroughly investigated, and the satrap has been diverting palace money to his own pocket.
That's impossible.
Isn't he your nephew, Latanus?
Indeed. And I can vouch for his integrity.
There must be some mistake.
How can Daniel know his character as I do? I will speak with him and resolve the matter.
We Medes and Persians are not as intolerant as these Jews. I'm sure we can fix this.
Very well. Settle it quickly, and that will be all.
All you Jews do is pray.
I could not serve the king the way I do without God's help.
Serve the king by intimidating satraps.
I've only done what I should.
An outsider has no place telling us how to conduct business.
I act in the king's interest.
We've heard how you acted in Nebuchadnezzar's interest. You made him go insane.
That was a message from Jehovah.
Call it what you will, but do not interfere with us.
Daniel, he served the Babylonian kings well, but
He's so old.
what Otanus means is, at Daniel's age, how reliable is his judgment?
His ideas are outdated.
Besides, he is a Jew.
Katu, we are tolerant of all peoples.
Yes, of course, that's my point.
Daniel, we were just talking about you. You were right. There's been a revolt in Susa. They demand a new satrap, one who doesn't steal from them.
But my lord, surely...
Enough. I sent my own inspectors, men I trust. Daniel, you've distinguished yourself over these men. Imagine what I could do if you were my prime minister.
Perhaps we could approach the king.
That's no use. Daniel's manipulating him.
We need an accusation against Daniel, something Darius can't ignore.
But no one's accused him of anything.
Not yet. Assemble a team to comb through our laws. Surely he's violated something. You, interview merchants, inspectors, officials, whoever will make an accusation against him. Assure the accuser he will be generously rewarded. We have the Babylonian records. Search for any scandal that might implicate him.
So again, we're watching part 2 of this year's Bible drama, Daniel, A Lifetime of Faith. In part 1, I drew your attention to a number of instances in which there were kind of hidden messages, stuff that had been inserted in the Daniel narrative to underscore certain values that Jehovah's Witnesses are encouraged to have, or certain ways that Jehovah's Witnesses are encouraged to think. In this case, there's a very clear narrative against apostates, because Daniel's opposers, Daniel's enemies, are quite clearly being depicted in the evil, scheming way that the organization wants Jehovah's Witnesses to think of apostates. Now, that being the intention, these portrayals are quite clearly silly and overblown and unrealistic. For example, you get the scene where Daniel's enemies confront him and try to intimidate him and question him. Well, if Daniel is supposed to be the governing body, at what point do apostates get to speak to the governing body? At what point do people like myself or other ex-Jehovah's Witness activists get to have any contact whatsoever with the governing body, so that we can bring the concerns of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses and many current Jehovah's Witnesses to the governing body, so that we can plead with them and say, please, can you be more reasonable? Please, can you be more sensitive to the needs of the people that you have made yourselves responsible for? The governing body seal themselves off and don't let anyone confront them. Don't let anyone question them or interrogate them. In fact, the only time I can think of, certainly in modern history, where a governing body member has been held accountable would be Geoffrey Jackson at the Australian Royal Commission. And the ones questioning him there were not apostates, were not ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. It was a royal commission. It was Angus Stewart, the senior counsel on behalf of the commission, asking very reasonable questions of Geoffrey Jackson. And Geoffrey Jackson used that opportunity to lie and obfuscate. So this portrayal, if Daniel is supposed to be standing in for the governing body here, this portrayal of Daniel versus his opposers is completely unrealistic and not what we've seen in recent times. As for corruption, because we see the opposers there plotting to bribe people to come forward with evidence against Daniel, if I'm seeing any corruption anywhere, it's with the governing body and, for example, their openness in settling abuse lawsuits rather than defending them, or rather than owning up to their failings. And in fact, we saw on the Saturday afternoon governing body member David Splain justifying this policy of settling child abuse lawsuits using the Bible. I realize that there's a difference between bribing someone for information and making a settlement in a lawsuit. But come on, it's shady, isn't it? This is a shady tactic. So in portraying opposers of God's people, they can't help but inadvertently, in my view at least, show the exact same tactics that they themselves are using. And I found it interesting when Daniel's enemies were before Belshazzar, and they brought up the whole issue of tolerance.
We Medes and Persians are not as intolerant as these Jews. I'm sure we can fix this.
This seemed, to me at least, to be an attempt at preparing Jehovah's Witnesses for the sorts of criticisms that they can expect to hear from outsiders when it comes to, for example, the Jehovah's Witness views on homosexuals, because this is obviously a homophobic religion. Like most Bible literalists, like most Christian fundamentalists, Jehovah's Witnesses seem to have a problem with homosexuality. And is it any wonder? Because in Leviticus 20 verse 13, it calls for the death of gay people. How can you not be against gay people if you take the Bible to be the inerrant word of God when the Bible is condemning gay people? And that is obviously a quintessentially intolerant position to take. And in fact, we had this whole scenario depicted for us in the 2018 convention.
Displaying courage now will help me display courage in the future.
Well, I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and we believe the Bible teaches sex is for a man and a woman who are married.
Intolerant people.
So there again, a Jehovah's Witness is accused of being intolerant, just the same as in the Daniel drama, where Daniel, and in fact all Jews, are accused of being intolerant. This seems to me to be another hidden message. It's the governing body's way of telling Jehovah's Witnesses, you're going to hear this. You're going to have people accuse you of being intolerant, but don't worry, you're not being intolerant. You're just sticking to God's standards.
There's nothing in the records.
Anything.
Not a shekel of silver is missing. In fact, when Daniel gets involved, corruption and loss go down.
Keep searching.
No one will speak against him. They all love him. And he has the king's trust. Usually the foreign merchants are ignored when they experience theft. However, Daniel stands up for them and investigates. He has thieves return whatever was stolen.
Even his friends are spotless. Nebuchadnezzar once forbade anyone to speak against their God.
Supposedly, this Jehovah saved them from the furnace when they refused to worship a Babylonian god.
Jews won't worship other gods.
So it would seem.
I think you've solved our problem.
Katu? Latanus? What favor do you seek?
O King Darius, may you live on forever. This Babylon, of which you are king, is mighty but diverse.
There are Babylonians, Egyptians, Greeks, and others.
Yes, Latanus, I know these things.
You are the rightful king, but also a foreigner and a newcomer. The people must adapt, or the kingdom could become unstable.
What do you suggest?
All royal officials, prefects, satraps, high royal officers, and governors have consulted together to establish a royal decree and to enforce a ban.
That for 30 days, whoever makes a petition to any god or man, except to you, O king, should be thrown into the lion's pit.
I, Darius the Mede, make this decree. For 30 days, anyone who makes a petition to any god or man, except to the king, should be thrown into the lion's pit.
So Daniel's scheming adversaries come up with the ultimate plan. Having gone through all of the records, having examined Daniel's history, they can't find anything to pin on him because he is blameless. He does everything above board. There's no corruption. He can't be bought. And they figure out that the way to get Daniel is to have this decree issued, this royal decree, which effectively bans anyone from offering any petition to any god or man for a period of 30 days, knowing full well that Daniel is in the habit of praying, I think, 3 times per day to God. Of course, none of this happened. As I've already explained, the book of Daniel is a forgery. This is a made-up story, but it's still interesting to view this narrative or this depiction from the point of view of the way the governing body wants Jehovah's Witnesses to think of apostates. Because it's again presenting a very misleading image of effectively the governing body being blameless. If we put Daniel in place of the governing body, and we put Daniel's enemies in place of the apostates, what this is saying is, oh, you can't find anything that you could pin on the governing body. You'll never find any reasonable basis for criticizing the leadership of Jehovah's Witnesses. Of course, that's completely untrue. If it were true, the organization would not be waist deep in problems with the mishandling of child abuse, in child abuse lawsuits. It would not have blood on its hands due to its blood policy. There would be no evidence of the psychological trauma caused by the policy of tearing apart families on ideological grounds. There would be no one who's suffered due to the organization's domestic violence policy, namely the policy whereby spouses have to stay with abusive partners and stay married to them for life. You're not allowed to leave someone, even if your life is in danger, if there is no adultery. There is indictment upon indictment when it comes to this organization. There is accusation upon accusation upon accusation. You simply cannot say that the governing body has this spotless record, which seems to be the hidden message here. They are seeing themselves in the role of Daniel, who was blameless and who everyone loved. I can assure you, not everyone loves the governing body. It can't even be said that all Jehovah's Witnesses love the governing body, because the very nature of this organization is that it holds people captive. It forces people to identify as Jehovah's Witnesses even after they've stopped believing, because they are terrified of the cruelest penalties if they're ever outed as unbelievers and shunned by their families.
You know me. And so do my enemies. I pray at my window 3 times a day, every day. If I even appeared to compromise, what would they think?
That you stopped praying altogether.
Or even worse, that I had traded my worship for my life. I know Jehovah. And if I trust him, he'll reward me. I don't know how, but he will. Pray that I keep my faith, that we all keep our faith, no matter how this ends. Hear me, O Jehovah. When I cry out, show me favor. And answer me. Your face, O Jehovah, I will seek to find. For you are my helper. Do not forsake me or leave me. My God of salvation.
So the trap is sprung. Daniel is defiant on this issue of praying. No royal decree is going to come between him and his daily prayers to Jehovah. His enemies know this, and so as soon as he goes to pray, they burst in and arrest him. And we will see what becomes of him as this drama progresses. But again, very strong messages here for Jehovah's Witnesses when it comes to, first of all, their perception of apostates, or how they are to perceive apostates, namely as wicked, scheming people. But also, there is this persecution, siege mentality very strongly alluded to here. You have that visual of Daniel kneeling down to pray, and his opposers pouring into the room and circling round him, and the way the camera moves around Daniel on a rotational axis, or whatever you call it, kind of emphasizes the fact that Daniel is completely surrounded. And it was very evocative of the images that we saw at the end of, I'm going to say it was the 2018 Be Courageous convention, where you saw the witnesses in the field and the people with assault weapons, the police, closing in on them. This seems to be the idea, the perception that the governing body wants Jehovah's Witnesses to have in their minds when it comes to Satan's system. The governing body needs Jehovah's Witnesses to feel encircled or besieged by Satan's forces. And that, for me, is very strongly the hidden message there. There's another hidden message, though, in the conversation that Daniel has with his friends. You'll notice where Daniel says,
if I even appeared to compromise, what would they think?
That you stopped praying altogether.
Or even worse, that I had traded my worship for my life.
Or even worse, that I'd trade my worship for my life, meaning my life is of secondary importance to my worship. So it's unthinkable in Daniel's mind that there could ever be anyone seeing his behavior or seeing his conduct and thinking this guy is putting his life ahead of his worship. And when you think about it, there's quite a chilling echo of this mentality when it comes to the organization's view of blood. That's an area in which Jehovah's Witnesses are very definitely not just urged, but it's demanded of them that they put their worship ahead of their lives. So that if blood is needed in order to save life, they need to martyr themselves effectively. They need to refuse blood because the worship comes first. This, for me, is the source of fanaticism that is alluded to in this part of the drama.